let's get into a little Tennessee Vols, man. We're going to take a look at the Tennessee Volunteers and what we think they can do this year. Chris, what are your thoughts on Tennessee?
All right, I'll break it down like I normally do, guys. Anybody that follows the show, follows the podcast, I like to break it down here from last year a little bit. Tennessee had I'm going to put it simple, a fucking amazing year for them last year. They did. They finished up 11-2, 6-2 in conference. I think they finished, 6th in the AP poll last year. Led the nation, Christian, in 46.1 points per game on offense. That was led by my boy, Hendon Hooker. If anybody knows, I was a big Hendon Hooker fan. I think that kid's a stud. I do think he'll be playing next year with the Lions or the year after Jared Goff decides to hang the shoes up, honestly, because Hendon Hooker, man, I think he's a great quarterback. I do. Love the kid as a person. Anybody ever hear him talk? He's also about Stetson Bennett's age. But great dude, though. Back on track here, though. 36 in opponents' points per game last year with 22.8. Strength of schedule was, I believe, top 25 last year. They beat Clemson in the Orange Bowl, which was a big win. Clemson was no pushover last year, even though it was a down year for Clemson in their standards, 31-14. This is the first time, I think, since 2007 they won double-digit games in a season for Tennessee. So last year was awesome. Everybody looks back at that game against Alabama, right? I think probably 90% of the country was watching that game last year. That was crazy. I was super pumped, obviously, because I definitely don't like Nick Saban. So seeing Tennessee knock them off in that crazy high score, was it like 52-49, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Crazy game, man. Crazy high-scoring game, Christian. But I want to kick it over to you. You like to break down a little bit of the stats and players a little more in depth than I do on offense, man. I'll kick it to you here to enlighten the audience on how smart you think you are.
Well, thank you for that, by the way. I lived in Tennessee for, about 5 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the Volunteers. I've seen them play a couple times in person. Let me just try to do the program a little bit of justice here for you guys, right? I know you see all the Georgia stuff up behind me there, back-to-back champs. Let's get into it. Josh Heupel, dude, he's got them believing, man. You touched on it, Chris. 11-2. Only 2 losses last year were to Georgia and South Carolina. Had a huge win against Alabama, which is fantastic. It's something that the program's been wanting to do for north of a decade, it seems as if, is beat Bama, right? Here's the thing. They lose their offensive coordinator last year, Alex Galesh, to USF, right, the Bulls. But Heupel's got his right-hand man of 15 years in there, and Joey Hazel, who he's going to be stepping in, even though I think Heupel's used to calling plays. I mean, Heupel's an offensive guy. We know that, right? He's called the plays. He handed it back to his, the former coordinator there, Golish, and then basically, I think that's something similar is going to happen. I think Heupel will probably start the year off calling plays, and then over time start to hand that off to Hazel a little more over time. Hand the offense to him. Here's the thing. You lose your offensive coordinator, you lose Hendon Hooker. But you get Joe Milton back. And Joe Milton, a few years ago, if you remember, he won the job over Hendon Hooker. But he struggled with accuracy. He could throw the ball a mile. That's never been the kid's issue. He can throw it a country mile. The accuracy was probably the biggest thing that I noticed with Joe Milton. Yeah, and so one of the big things there is, I got a feeling, though, he's going to dial it in a little more here, Chris. He's going to be a lot more dialed in this year.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. Joe Milton, I believe he was at Michigan, right, for some time before he came over to Tennessee. He was very highly recruited. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Richardson as far as the intangibles, the size, the speed. You know what I mean? Like, he's just he's a big kid, athletic as hell. A rocket for a freaking arm. Like I said, I think Joe Milton's going to be good. I just think what Hendon Hooker did last year was just ridiculous. I think that surprised some people around the country. My big question on offense is, though, you lose Jalen Hyatt, who was their big-time receiver, broke a ton of records there last year, and then Cedric Tillman, who came off that injury, played at the end of the year. He's in the NFL as well. Both those guys are studs. I know they got some guys replacing him, Christian, but man, they lost some key pieces there on offense, Tennessee did. But I think Heupel is an offensive guru. He's a former quarterback at Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. The guy knows his shit. I think he's going to be okay.
I'm going to finish up on Milton, and then I'm going to get right to that. Because you bring up a good point with the wide receivers here. Chris, look, Joe Milton, he had, in mop-up duty in a couple starts last year, he had 971 yards and 10 touchdowns to no interceptions. Okay. The biggest question mark is you lose a quarterback. Even at Georgia, they lose Stetson Bennett. Who's going to be the next guy up? Can Carson Beck manage this offense, right? We look at the same thing in Tennessee. Can Joe Milton run this offense and be the point guard that Hendon Hooker was? I think he can, right? Your biggest question marks, the wide receivers. You touched on it, Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt. But, dude, they bring back Brew McCoy, Ramel Keaton, and Squirrel White, right? Who are going to absolutely be able to step up and do that. Brew McCoy, big physical guy. He's going to be able to replicate what Cedric Tillman could do. Squirrel White is going to kind of be able to get in there and do exactly what Jalen Hyatt did as well. I mean, he's an elusive kind of guy. So you've got two guys that are kind of carbon copies of them who can step up. They produced last year. Both those guys I just mentioned, they produced. And then you got Ramel Keaton, who can kind of do similar things to both of them. He's a big, strong, fast kid that can make some things happen. So I don't think they're going to be, necessarily the wide receiver game. I don't think it's going to be off. They're going to still have some production there. I like that. They also bring back running backs. They're both running backs last year, Jalen Wright and Jabari Small. They combined. You ready for the stat line, Chris? They combined for 1,700 yards and 25 touchdowns last year.
Impressive. Very impressive.
The offensive line should be pretty good this year, too. They did lose some tackles and some different pieces of that offensive line over the year, but I think they're going to be okay. Again, Tennessee on offense, not all that worried. Defensively, Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
This is where I think they need to improve. I know they've lost some pieces. You'll get into the players here as you always do. I think they were ranked 127th in the nation last year in pass defense, Christian. It was bad. I mean, we saw the Bama game. I know it's Bryce Young on the other side of the ball. I get all that, but the South Carolina game where Spencer Rattler just fucking torched him. And no, don't get me wrong. He played the game of his life. That was the one good game I think of, maybe 1 out of 3 I've ever seen him actually play well and not cost them a game at South Carolina. But they got destroyed that game. I think that surprised a lot of people. Not that necessarily that South Carolina won that game, but just the score when you look at it from an outside view. But the defense has got to improve, man. If they want to compete for an SEC title this year, the SEC is going to be good. We know that. We don't have to get into how good the SEC is week in and week out, but it's going to be tough. And I'm going to let you I'm going to kick it right over to you. You always got the most knowledge on the players, who's coming back, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think, defensively last year, they weren't, if you look at the season as a whole, they really weren't terrible. But there was, like you said, there was a couple of games last year where they got lit alive, especially in the passing game, right? And I think this year they're going to be much better, right? Tim Banks, I think he's in his 3rd year there with them. I think they're going to be fine. They recruit that side of the ball pretty well. They're probably going to make some schematic changes. They're going to work some things in. They get some kids back that have experience. To me, I think they'll be okay there. The other good news, and the best part of this, is they get the heart and soul of the defense back from last year, and linebacker Aaron Beasley. He's coming back. Mm-hmm. They also have a very uberly talented freshman linebacker. And I've heard a lot of things about this here, right? Arian Carter is his name. Keep an eye on him. I hear he's going to be doing some good things at Tennessee, right? And a lot of Tennessee fans are excited about what he can bring to the table this year. Chris, the other thing is they get back just about all their defensive line from last year. Now, here's the other side of this. This is the other side of this, and this is where I think some of these stats and stuff like that, you kind of have to dig in a little more. They combined their entire defensive line last year combined for 8 sacks. So, you look around the country and guys that are getting drafted have, I think Will Anderson Jr. at some point had more than double that at a certain point. So, right. You've got to be able to get to the quarterback and kind of affect his accuracy to be able to help that secondary out.
Well, that's why they finished so poorly, I think, and that's where I was getting to on the secondary, right, where you finished in the bottom 10 of the country in pass defense. Well, a lot of that, usually most relatively smart people go, where was your pass rush, right? If you're not putting any pressure on the quarterback, Christian, your DBs can't cover forever. I don't care if it's Sauce Gardner back there,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, you're exactly right. You touched on it. I mean, they ranked 127th last year in passing yards allowed. The secondary this year, they're going to need Jamarian McDonald and Kamal Hadden to step up big time and lead them. I'll kind of touch on this really quickly as we're moving through it. I think his name is McCullough. They're starting safety slotted. He's still on the roster right now. There's some stuff kind of going on where there's an alleged assault charge kind of going on.
Okay.
They kind of have to get that part figured out. And if they can get that kid back, that'd be a pretty big grab for him. But outside of that, Chris, I do think on the outside looking in, a lot of non-Tennessee fans would be quick to say, look, they're not scared of Tennessee defensively. But I think this year they're going to figure some things out. They're pissed off. Heupel's had to hear it for the last couple of years. He's not a defensive-minded guy. I think the thing that's keeping them from really taking that next step and being on that same level as a Georgia or an Alabama is the defense, right? I mean, not just because Kirby and Nick Saban are defensive gurus, but I think it's more or less, their offenses are always typically good enough to be able to keep them in just about every game they play. I think you have to do the same thing if you're Tennessee on defense, and you have to be more than, I'm not saying you got to be elite. You don't have to be the next Georgia, but you got to at least be able to hold teams to, 24, 25 points a game.
Right, and I think that's the big thing, too, is I guess my question is part of that. I also have a little bit of question Joe Milton stepping in. I'm not saying the kid ain't talented, and I think that Heupel runs kind of more of a plug-and-play style system. That's what it looks like to me, where it is kind of like a Lincoln Riley, right? Or a Ryan Day offense where it just seems like every 3 years they put a new quarterback there and he's putting up these crazy numbers. And it really doesn't matter who it is. Don't get me wrong, those quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and C.J. Stroud, are all studs. But obviously, the defense, I think if they can they don't have to be elite. They don't have to be a top 20 defense to be able to compete in the SEC. It's just in those tight games, Christian, where maybe the offense isn't moving the ball as well as they normally do, right? Can your defense bend but not break, keep you in some games? Instead of giving up touchdowns inside the red zone, you give up a field goal, right? That's crucial in the SEC. We watch a lot of SEC football here. You see it all the time. You can't be giving up 49 to Bama. You know what I mean? God, thank God their offense outscored them, but that's a track meet, man. That's over 100 points scored in a game by two teams. That's crazy. You don't see that all the time, even in college football.
No, you definitely don't. Tennessee fans, down below, be sure to comment what you think about your Volunteers this year as we get ready. I think, Chris, we're going to jump in now to a little bit of the record predictions here for Tennessee. Chris, let me get the schedule pulled up here.
There we go.
Just a tad bit.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Chris,
all right. Sorry,
I'll let you give your thoughts. Yeah,
no, you're fine, man. I'm ready to jump into this because I already have a feeling that you're going to be really, really, really high. And I feel like I'm going to probably piss some Tennessee people off, and that's okay. Here's my thing with Tennessee this year. And like I said, I broke down the offense. We broke down the defense. I got the win at Virginia. I'm not worried about that. Austin P, whatever you want to call him. Here's the big one here. And everybody knows I just take a lot of shit from the Florida Gators. I think Tennessee fucking destroys them, personally. Chalk that up as a W, Christian. That UTSA game, they're actually supposed to be pretty good this year. They really are. I mean, for a team that's over there, I think what do they call that? The AAC or whatever the hell they're in with Tulane, that conference. But no, Tennessee destroyed. Not worried about that. So we're starting off 4-0. That's great. We get into that South Carolina game. Christian, me and you have some thoughts on South Carolina. I think that will obviously going to be a rematch last year. Spencer Rattler's back. South Carolina's gotten some offseason hype this year. I have Tennessee beating them. I don't think South Carolina can do it 2 years in a row personally. Move on to A&M. A&M, big game, but Tennessee has both South Carolina and A&M at home. I think that's huge for the Vols. Bama, I have the one loss there. I also think they struggle and lose to Kentucky. I know that surprises you, but this is the way I've went over this a couple different times, this breakdown. I think they lose to Kentucky. They slip up there. I truly do. UConn, Jesus, I didn't even know they still had a football team. Moving on to Missouri. I'm not worried about the Tigers over there. Georgia. I think it's going to be a good game. I think Georgia gets the nod, though. They're going to beat Vanderbilt. I have them at 9-3, Christian. And I know a lot of people, a lot of polls have Tennessee right now between 9 and 15. I did a lot of research on this. I obviously I do my own rankings. I don't base mine off of Christian's or somebody else or anybody at ESPN or any of those big major websites. But I see a 9-3 year, Christian. I don't think that's a bad year. I have a few questions about Joe Milton. I have a few questions about the receivers replacing Hyatt and Tillman this year? And can the defense improve? I think they can. If those things do happen, they definitely got a chance to maybe go 10-2, maybe surprise Alabama. I hope they beat them again. That would be fucking awesome for me. But Christian, I want to hear your thoughts since you gave me those couple minutes there to break that down, buddy.
Yeah, not a problem. Like I said, first of all, you're wrong. I think that they're going to be.
Surprise me.
Yeah, no,
That
I think
surprised me.
I'll go ahead and just jump right into it. I'm not going to jump around here. I think 11-1. That's where I got them at.
Holy shit! What's your one loss? Is it the Bama Georgia? Is that what you're splitting it?
Nope. This is probably going to be what's going to surprise you. South Carolina.
Wow, man, you are riding the Gamecocks hard this year, damn, dude.
Well, listen, 11-1. Your only loss is to South Carolina. Just because I think that you got to look at it from this standpoint. Does Texas A&M with as much as they've lost in the portal this year, do they scare me? No. Does Alabama does any quarterback on their roster scare me? No.
Fuck no.
Georgia. We just touched on this before we got on the.
This surprises me.
Yeah, we just touched on this a little bit before we got on here. In the second half of that national championship game, a lot of the Georgia players were out there on the sidelines eating chicken wings and fucking off. This could be a year where there's a lot of pieces that are coming back, but a lot more pieces that have gone on, right, to the NFL or graduated, whatever have you. Georgia might be in for a weird slump here, right, where they could have a couple losses this year. I think Tennessee's one of those teams that can absolutely, figure it out. And the reason why I say South Carolina, right? If anybody you're looking at, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't jump out. I like what South Carolina's doing. They've got Spencer Rattler, they got Shane Beamer over there. I think that they're going to probably be in for a sneakily good year this year. They can pull off a couple of upsets this year. I like I said, I think Tennessee might be one of those games, especially last year. You saw how they played late in the season against.
It was ugly.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a very close game. So I know Tennessee's going to be fired up and ready to go, but at the same time, I think that they have a loss. If it's not to South Carolina, pick any one of these schools. I think for me, they're going to have another 11-1 season this year.
Okay, I got a problem with this. Your whole fucking take here, actually. So I got one question first to start off and ask you. You're a Georgia Bulldogs fan, right?
Yes, sir.
Are you you a diehard truther? Do you walk around every day letting everybody know that you're back-to-back national champs?
I do.
Okay. If Tennessee beats Georgia, I want to make a bet with you right here. If Tennessee beats Georgia, I want you to take that shit down behind you, and you got to hang up something with the Vols. I can't believe, Christian. I know you're a realist, and I know that the likelihood of Georgia three-peating is super, super low. I get that. I just can't believe, man, that you got South Carolina being the team that beats them out of all these teams. Alabama, South Carolina, or I'm sorry, not South Carolina, but even Florida's on that list, who we don't think very highly of. Connecticut. You might think UConn's going to come in there and beat them, Christian. Is that a chance? I mean, where you're taking this is just like, I'm serious. Like, the one loss you pick out of this whole schedule with A&M in there, Bama, Kentucky, obviously, Missouri, Georgia. You think they slip up against South Carolina again?
Yeah, I do. Let me explain why,
man,
Chris. It's college. Listen, it's college football. Last year we saw the same shit with TCU, right? TCU. Now, granted, we're talking two completely different teams here, but we see it all the time in college football. Last year, TCU lost to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. Then they turn around and beat what everybody thought was going to be a landslide against Michigan, right? They turn around and beat Michigan and pretty much handled that game, right? You just never know in college football. Right? You're asking, could they lose to UConn? Yeah. I mean, shit. It's college football, right? I'm not saying they're going to. I'm just saying you're trying to get my goat here. I know what you're trying to do. I could throw it back on you and just say, hey, listen, motherfucker, 2022 is a lot sooner and a lot closer to where we're at now than 1995.
Hey, look, no. I ain't bringing up 1995, man. That's just so I can bag on all those Florida people because all they do is talk shit to me. Here's the other thing, though. Okay, then I'll ask you this. No, all bullshit aside. Does Tennessee, in your end of the year rankings, win the SEC or at least in the title game? Then I'm assuming 11-1.
I would say it'd have to be. It would have to be.
Right. So you got them in the playoffs.
It would just depend on, again, it would depend on who they go up against. You know what I mean? Really and truly.
Okay.
In that game, I'm not saying they're going to win the SEC. I mean, theoretically, if they get that far, I would hope they would.
Right.
Right. I mean, like I said, if you're 11-1, I would almost expect them to be in the playoffs. So
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a bold take, and I don't want to hate on any Tennessee people here. I'm not. I think their season last year was amazing. I mean, with coming in with Joe Milton, and I'm not hating on Joe Milton, but losing those two stud wide receivers and the defense giving up that kind of passing yards next year, I know this is a different year, and I understand that. I've been around college football for 30 years. I get it, but like, damn, man, and Christian, I hope you're right. I don't mind the Volunteers at all. It's just, damn, I love it, man. I hope you put some money down this year on the Volunteers. Holy shit, man, that's impressive. 11-1. I was. Like I said, me and Christian, by the way, guys, we do not talk about this before we do the pod. So this is all new news to me. So I love it when we have arguments like this. I think it's great. I say 9-3. I still think that's a fucking awesome year for Tennessee this year. Christian says I'm full of shit. Next thing you know, in a week or two from now, they're running the table, winning a national title. So,
well, but you got to think about it too. You know, Chris, you don't go from making $100,000 a year to $60,000, and you're excited about it. You know, so you can't go from winning 10, 11 games a year to winning 6, you know, or to winning 9 and be cool about it.
Well, I agree. I thought maybe last year was a little bit of an outlier year with Tennessee, just from the previous, history they've had, because they've been pretty bad before that. I mean, they've had some decent teams in there, but they haven't won a title since 98 or whatever the hell it was with Peyton Manning. Or not, no, it wasn't Peyton Manning. It was T. Martin.
T. Martin.
Yeah, so I mean, they got their ass beat by Bama, I swear, 14 out of the last 15 years. So I do think Josh Heupel's a damn good coach. I think he's a great offensive mind, obviously. He showed that last year. A few questions on the quarterback. If Joe Milton can play, that's where I'm really at with that, and the wide receivers, dude. Otherwise, if their offense puts up they had a number 1 fucking scoring offense last year. They do that again. Tennessee will be looking at a 10-2, 11-1 type of season. They might have one slip up there. It's hard to run the table, as you know, Christian. And, of course, you guys have done that, so I'm preaching to the wrong guy here.
Have we? I hadn't really been paying attention.
I know. I hate that you've won 2 back-to-back titles. It really makes this podcast hard for me. It really does. Because I can't, say anything because, George has just been fucking unreal. And just imagine that's your team and the state you're from. So if I had the Iowa man on here, I could easily, get my way. But here I am. So it's good for me, though. Anyway, Christian, I like your take, though. I like it. It was good. It was a good take.